So hello and welcome. And it occurred to me that I'm teaching about thinking this week and coming to the end, and somehow I happily don't have many thoughts about this topic at the moment. I feel pretty content. So to not need anything, to sit upright, meditate, and let go of needs, expectations, let go of it needing to be any particular way. To be here with the simplicity of being. With whatever's here, including the complications. So lowering the gaze, 45 degrees to the floor perhaps. Relaxing the gaze, loose focus. Not really looking at anything in particular. And then closing the eyes. And to be here with this body. This body that we have, that we are, that we're in. This body that just is. Can be like the temple that we enter. And we can enter it with our deeper breathing. Breathing in fully, allowing the rib cage to expand. If you breathe deep enough, it lifts the shoulders a bit. With a full, deep in-breath, even the belly might expand outward. And then on the exhale, to relax all that, to release. Maybe at the end of the exhale, to let your elbows kind of flap a little bit, swing a little bit, so that there's a looseness in the arms. Letting the breathing return to normal. And continuing to relax. Softening the muscles of the face. Releasing the shoulders as you exhale. Softening the belly as you exhale. And maybe also softening it on the inhale. Feeling the touch of your clothes against your skin against the clothes. And relaxing all along that meeting place of skin and clothes. Relax, soften. And gently, on the exhale, relax the core of your being, the most deepest, tender place within. Allow it to trust enough to relax, to soften. And then there's the thinking muscle. Whatever tension or pressure, contraction that you might feel associated with thinking. It might be physical. It might be a mental tension. Whatever it might be, as you exhale, soften it. Let it become calmer. Maybe letting go of any need to think, the pressure to think. The interest in thinking. Put it aside for now, so your thoughts can float away like thought bubbles blowing away in the wind. One of the thoughts to let go of is any thoughts connected to time. Even thinking about the end of the next breath is to be involved in time. To not have thoughts about time allows each passing thing to exist while it's present, as if it's there forever. In the quiet stillness of the mind. Each in-breath, moments in forever, no time. Each part of the exhale, fully there itself, no time, forever. Breathing in, breathing out. No in, no out, just sensations appearing and disappearing. And when there is no time, no appearing and disappearing, just is, each moment. loosening up on your thinking. Let it become calmer and quieter. Let yourself very gently think about here, just here, letting go into here. Let that be the content of your thinking. thoughts be quiet and soft, calm thinking. Have your thinking remember a time that you received someone's care, goodwill, kindness that was touching for you. Heart softening, where something inside of you resonated with that care, that kindness. Or think of a time that you were caring and kind, that was meaningful for you, the feeling, the way it arose and lived in you. Quiet thoughts, simple, relaxed thinking to remember how it felt in the body, the mind, the heart. What was inspiring about that for you? And then quietly, calmly, see if you can have thoughts in your own way of thinking of goodwill, kindness for others. People you know in your life, people you run into, strangers. Very simple, ordinary attitude of kindness and goodwill. And what kind of thoughts would accompany that? What place in the heart or with what place inside might be awakened with such thoughts of goodwill, of kindness? When the mind is quiet, it can be a meaningful time to think wholesome thoughts, beneficial thoughts, especially at the end of the meditation, to prepare yourself to go into the world with a caring heart. May all beings be happy. May all beings be safe. May all beings be peaceful. May all beings be free. And may you share in that happiness and peace and freedom. May all beings be happy. So we come now to the last talk on mindfulness of thinking. And as I've said, mindfulness of thinking. Thinking is just as much of a valid subject for mindfulness as anything else, including the breathing. The art of it, however, is that to think, to be mindful without thinking more, not be thinkfulness because you're mindful of thinking. And so usually the breathing is often a very good focus of meditation because it tends to be calming and settling, and it's a physical sensation. So it tends to kind of help us kind of step out of the world of thinking so that can quiet down. So thinking maybe isn't always a good object for beginners because it pulls us into itself and we start thinking more and more. But on principle, thinking is just as valid as a subject of mindfulness as anything else. We turn our attention towards it. And sooner or later, it's really wise to do it. Especially if you've been meditating for a long time and you have some ability to just really look at thinking and see it, and look it right in the eye and study what goes on in it. It's a whole systems, a whole complex of things that are involved with the thinking that come into play. And one of those things is our clinging, our grasping, our holding on, our stickiness, our compulsivity with thinking. And in the end, we're not looking to stop having thoughts. Freedom is manifested in not having that stickiness with thoughts, not clinging to thoughts, and having a state of mind, a consciousness and awareness which has released itself from thinking, even if thinking still goes on. And for this purpose, I distinguish between thinking and thoughting. Thoughting is just what the mind does. The mind is a thoughting machine. It'll just produce thoughts. They float up and float away. Thinking is when we're involved in those thoughts. When there's a little bit, and sometimes it's appropriate to be involved, but more often than not, when we're involved, there is some compulsivity, some clinging, some grasping to it. And so to study thinking as a way of discovering where grasping and where clinging is. And as a kind of a fascinating window into the clinging to thoughts, whenever you're in a hurry, chances are pretty high that your thinking is compulsive. Your thinking is grabbed onto something, holding on. The syndrome of hurriedness usually comes along with hurried thoughts, pushing thoughts, wanting thoughts, crowded thoughts, one after the other. And not only is the mind kind of crowded with a lot of thoughts when we hurry, but sometimes you can feel the push, the compulsivity, if you allow yourself to feel it. There's a kind of command from hurry, like don't pay attention to itself, just get the job done, do what has to be done. So to turn around 180 degrees and look at thinking itself is a real task. And so in terms of hurrying, it's possible to do things quickly without hurrying. So hurry is this extra kind of compulsivity, this being caught in something that has to be done quickly. It's possible to do things quickly without being caught. So one of the things we're looking for in the Dharma is not to be without thinking or without thoughts, but to be with them without clinging to them. And now this is a very profound thing because that's all we ever cling to. When there's clinging, unless you're at the edge of a cliff holding on, clinging to the railing, um, you know, then you're clinging to the railing. But generally, the clinging that we're addressing in Buddhism is the predominant clinging that human beings are involved in all the time. And that is, we're clinging to ideas and thoughts. That's really what we cling to. We don't see it that way, because if I'm clinging to a person, I think I'm clinging to that person. But if you're really quiet and study your mind, you see you're not clinging to the person unless you're holding their hand tight. You're clinging to the idea that person is in your mind. The associations you have, the meanings you have, the value you have around that person, the desires you have around that person. It's the clinging to ideas, to thoughts. And to start seeing that is fascinating. So, the recipe is not the same thing as a meal. To cling to the recipe and never cook, you never have a meal. A map is not the territory. When I was a relatively young Zen student, I had some challenge with my father. Enough that I talked to my Zen teacher about it. And he made this comment to me, which really struck me. He said, before your father was a father, there was a before he was a father. He was a person without any fatherhood, any being a father. And when he said that, I said, wow, I'm only seeing him through the lens of being my father. He has a whole other side of him, of how he lives his life without being a father. I wonder who he is. I wonder how he is there in those situations. And we hold on to these ideas of how it is. So there's a kind of a cliche, kind of a little saying that came from, I think, Munindraji, this Indian Vipassana teacher who was a teacher for many of us. I just knew him briefly. And he said, the thoughts of your mother are not your mother. So we have these thoughts, these ideas, and to release our thoughts from our grasping and clinging. And here's a very interesting idea that, in Buddhism, the goal, in a sense, is liberation, is freedom. And often the idea we're holding on to is that I will be free when I'm liberated. But maybe it doesn't work that way. Maybe you will never be free. Those are just ideas and thoughts. If anything, what's happening is you're giving freedom to the world. You give freedom to your thoughts, not to think wildly and recklessly and unwholesomely. The reckless thoughts, the unwholesome thoughts, the harmful thoughts that we think are a form of clinging. We're holding on to an idea, to something. Without clinging to anything, the thoughts will gravitate, will flow towards what is wholesome, what's immediate, because it's not driven by desires, by hatreds, and all this stuff. So rather than you becoming free, you're giving freedom to your thoughts. And to have thoughts be free is one of the great delights. To have thoughts just kind of relaxedly just appear. It's kind of like a miracle that thoughts appear. Where do they come from? They just kind of, to be quiet and still and watch a new thought be born. Where did that come from? It just arises and floats by and goes away, and it's not any different than a flower blooming and fading. It's not any different than the clouds forming in the skies and passing by. It's not any different than a leaf floating in the wind, hovering and finally landing someplace. If we don't identify with the thoughts, to identify with a thought is to be attached to little kind of identification thoughts. This is me, this is mine. To not make thoughts me, myself, and mine is so wonderful. To not have to take them personally. To not have to do anything with them. To not have to measure oneself by it. When I was about 14 or so, 13 or 14, my father took me aside to have a little father-son talk. And he said to me, I don't know if it was that intentional, but he said to me, as you grow up, from time to time you'll have bizarre thoughts. And I kind of, okay, I thought, okay. I mean, I didn't know what to do with that information. And lo and behold, some point or other, I had bizarre thoughts. And I said, oh, my father told me about this, that this might happen. And because of that, I had no inclination to do anything about them, or to judge them, or to be horrified by them, or whatever. Whatever they were, I don't even remember. But they were just bizarre thoughts. Just they come and they go. Thoughts are kind of like a dime a dozen. They come and they go. And the ability to step back from them and not automatically latch onto them is a kind of a power, because it allows us to choose which thoughts we get involved in and which we don't. And that is where maybe a certain kind of freedom resides, the freedom to choose what we think. And the primary choice that I think that we learn in this practice is mostly what not to do, what not to think. Oh, no, I don't need to do that. I don't need to do that. Sometimes it's very, very appropriate to actually choose what we think about. Like at the end of the meditation, spend a little time choosing to think about goodwill and kindness. It has a double purpose. It has a purpose of helping us stay free, to open the heart and not cling, and just open ourselves and be available to the world in a kind way. Kind of, hopefully clears the decks of our hearts, so that we can kind of just be available for the world, and we're not clinging and holding on to me, myself, and mine. And it nourishes something very important in us. And it supports and helps other people. All those can happen, that dedication of our thinking that way. But the thinking needs to be done in a free way, in a relaxed way, easy way, calmly. And to learn how to think, some of us need to relearn our thinking. But first to learn how to be free of thoughts, to release them. So may you explore, study, ride the edge of where you can find ways to not cling to your thinking. And you don't necessarily have to let go of your thoughts, just let go of the clinging and see what happens. And so, releasing thoughts. So then, next week I'll continue this series on kind of the basic mindfulness practice. And I'm going to talk about now something that provisionally we'll call mindfulness of mind. And so it's we'll continue with this momentum that we have over the last 4 weeks. So thank you very, very much, and I look forward to Monday.